issues. Misalignment meaning the LLM's response is not aligned with the human desires. That could mean it's malicious, that could mean it's just not what you wanted. But all these things you might catch once you start logging. Additionally, you want to track the usage costs and latency. Where is the money being spent? Who's spending it? Which LLMs are slow, and is that a problem? If you're building a user-facing chatbot, it needs to be really fast. If you're building a back-end data pipeline where you're just trying to classify millions of data points, then maybe you're not worried about a super fast model. So these are the kind of things you want to be tracking in your system to make sure you have an idea of what's going on. You want to have error alerting, of course. I find that if you're using providers, some people here raised their hand and said, I'm using open source. At Pattern, we use a lot of the proprietary models, OpenAI, Anthropic, Bedrock by AWS. These people are just awful with being reliable. It's terrible. They do not have reliable services. They go down all the time. And so a lot of LLM Ops tools, which we'll talk about in a minute, they will have fallbacks just built in as part of them. If you use Light LLM, it just has fallbacks built straight into it. Our internal tools that we've built in, we've built fallbacks in because we find that these providers, they tend to air out a lot of the times. OpenAI will be like, we're down for 4 hours today. And it impacts our production systems. And also, you just want to know when stuff goes wrong in general. So you don't want to have the way you find out something went wrong is your users messaging you on Slack, hey, the chatbot is down. Did you know that? It's kind of an awkward way to find out. So you want to be the first to know. And then finally, observability into downstream applications. What we found is that the usage of LLMs in our AI systems has just exploded exponentially across the org. We have like dozens, if not hundreds, of users that have our API keys that are using it all over the organization. So it's important to have visibility into which downstream applications are using your system so that you can understand where all the different flows are going, especially if you're making changes to your system, because that can have downstream effects. There's a guy by the name of Hiram Wright who lives here in Utah, and he's a former Googler, and he has a law called Hiram's Law. You can Google it on the internet. And this is a law he developed while he was at Google, which obviously Google has millions of users. And the law says that if you have an API, all characteristics or attributes of the API will become assumed as like written into the contract, even if it's not explicitly stated. Let's say, for example, you have an API that returns, a list of names, and you push out an update that changes the ordering of the list of names. Same data, you hadn't mentioned anything about the ordering, but now you change the listing of how it's alphabetized. Suddenly some user downstream is like, hey, I was expecting those names to be alphabetized, now it's breaking everything in my system. And the same thing will happen with your AI systems where you might add a feature, change a feature, roll a feature back or forward, all of a sudden you get people calling you up like, hey, what's going on? And so it's important to have that visibility so you can clearly understand what changes might affect your users. Now the other half is evaluating, and this is where it's really fun for you if you're running the LLM Ops platform, because you get to go out and improve your workflows, improve your agentic systems by evaluating them, right? I've got this funny image here, of a robot being measured, and that's what this is all about. And really it comes down to these steps here. You want to create benchmarks. It turns out there's a reason LLM providers always talk about these. It's because they're really helpful for helping you solve problems. But you want to have benchmarks unique to your problems. Now, a benchmark is just a data set, right? It's a data set of inputs and outputs related to the problem you're trying to solve. Let's say you're trying to solve a classification problem. You've got images, you want to classify them. So you get a data set, a couple hundred examples of images, and then you have what the correct labels would be for those images. And then you would create a benchmark of, oh, this is the accuracy level that I want on this data set. Then what you can do is you can run the data set through different LLMs. You can run it on Gemini. You can run it on ChatGPT. You can run on all these different models and see, oh my gosh, Gemini is really bad at image recognition and labeling. Wow, GPT 4.1 is really good at it. And start to narrow that in. You can start to also make adjustments to your prompts, all those sort of things. Now, let's talk about metrics of how to measure the success of your LLM outputs. Heuristic metrics. Now, I've got some little doodads here. Check these cute guys out. Isn't that fun? So we use an LLM Ops platform called Opik from Comet, and I greedily emailed them and said, I want some swag so that I can just like toss stuff out at this meetup I'm going to. And they said, we got you. And I was expecting like t-shirts or something, or hats, something normal. And they sent these guys instead. So I want to get some audience participation here. What are some heuristic or explicit metrics you could use to evaluate if your output matches your reference?
Exact matching.
Exact matching.
Here you
go. Oh, that was a good toss. Wow. I like it. Exact matching. So making sure that the label exactly matches your reference. What are some other like types of ways we could see if we're getting what we want?
You can use like some Liechtenstein distance as well, right?
Yes.
Like that.
Liechtenstein, however it's pronounced. That is a great example. Oh, I got the water bottle. That could have been bad. Yeah, Liechtenstein distance is a great one. It can get a little dicey once you start to get into larger bodies of text. There are some similar ones to Liechtenstein. I'm curious if anybody knows any of them.
If you're doing something with safety, you can like see if it responds on "I'm sorry" or something along those lines.
Yes, so that would be what we would call a contained search. See if it like contains the piece of text that we're interested in. Whoa, I gotta throw these farther. Jack. Say that again. I don't think I know that one. Descartes similarity. Oh, that's a good one. Okay, and that would kind of account if some of the ordering is different. Or misspellings as well. Back there. That's a great one. So we talk a lot about using like embeddings and vector search with RAG, but you can also use this to evaluate your outputs, right? You can embed the output and the reference and see what the cosine similarity is. Great answer. Whoa. Oh, sorry. Okay, those are some great examples. Let's jump over to LLM as judge. We can use another LLM as a judge. Now, how many of you have heard of LLM as judge by raise of hands? Okay, good smattering in the audience. I like it. Okay, so LLM as judge is this idea that like, okay, normally we want like humans to like rank outputs, compare outputs, or like have specialized ways of analyzing them, but humans are expensive, right? Well, what if we just ask an AI to evaluate the AI? Kind of a crazy idea, right? Turns out it works really well. So what you can do is you can take your AI generated outputs and your references, and you can have the LLM judge it. This is also known as G-eval. And you can create custom prompts for judging the output compared to the reference, or just the output by itself if there's no reference. An example would be moderation, or you could ask it more complex prompts to see if it meets some sort of standard that you're interested in. Now, this is most effective when you are having a larger, bigger, intelligent model judge the result of a smaller model. Now, why would you do that? You're like, why wouldn't I just use the bigger model anyways? Well, if you're running a data pipeline where you have to crunch millions of classifications, you may want to see if that smaller one pays off, right? And you're like, I know the bigger one can do it accurately, but what I can do is I can create a data set of several thousand examples, have a small, tiny LLM, something that's like 9 billion parameters, 3 billion parameters, run through and try to classify those images, and then I can have the big model step in, judge it, and see did the small model get it right or not. So kind of an interesting technique, and you can create your own custom metrics as well. Now, variables. When I say variables, these are things that we can change between different experiment runs. Can anybody think of an example we could change from experiment to experiment? There's lots of options here. Ben? Temperature, exactly. Boom.
You can try out whole different prompts, right?
Change your prompts, exactly. You can do manual prompt adjustment, or if you're really smart like Chris, you can use something like DSPY. Get really fancy. What else can we change?
Context window.
Context window. We can try adding more context, more data. I'm finding that most of the models now have massive context windows, so that's not really an issue. But that kind of leads into, you could change the model that you're choosing, right? All right, in the back, last one.
Top K.
Top K, getting fancy out here. Okay. Woo! That was a close one. Okay. I love it. All right, now let's talk about picking an LLM Ops platform. There's a lot of options out there. So when we decided that we wanted to get serious about LLM Ops, we already had like some basic stuff in place that we kind of homegrown, but it was not that great. It was fine, but we wanted to get something a little bit better. So we started looking at the different options out there, and boy, are there a lot of options. So these are some of the ones that I've tossed up on here that are out there. There's a lot more, obviously, but these are some of the more interesting and popular ones. And I won't go through all of them, but I just wanted to throw these all up here because it's kind of fun to have a bunch of logos up on one picture. And I thought it might be interesting for you guys. Now, looking through all different options, these are kind of the 3 different categories of LLM Ops companies that I found out there. First is the startup. Young, hungry, innovates quickly. A lot of these out there, right? Langfuse is probably the most popular one. And as I go through these, I want you to understand I'm not biased towards any of these choices. I think all of these are valid, right? It all depends on your company, your use cases, on which of these is the right one. But again, startups, they're really young, hungry, they innovate quickly, which is important in the world of AI. But you know, sometimes brittle code base written on vibes. It's someone just working out of their apartment. They could disappear tomorrow. Yeah, their code's open source, but it's like, what if all the support dries up for it? The second type of company I saw while researching the MLOps platform, weights and biases, common ML. All of them are like, oh, this is a cinch. We already do this basically. We're just gonna pivot and make a new thing for LLM Ops. And they have this deep expertise in ML that you can really like work with them, and their stuff's really good. But there are some risks. They may try to Frankenstein an existing MLOps tool and try to kind of like squeeze it in and say like, well, this is an LLM Ops tool that's now also an LLM tool. But a lot of times, it doesn't work quite as well as you think it does. Personally, I don't have to worry about storing model weights or storing different versions of models because I'm not building models like a traditional ML engineer would, right? Like all my LLMs, they live in the cloud with OpenAI and Anthropic. I'm just calling them. I don't need to worry about versioning my models. So that's a whole feature set I'm not interested in. The other thing is some of them may not open source. They're used to like, you know, running big expensive models on big expensive GPUs, and it's all proprietary and has really high price tags, and it's call us to get an estimate, no pricing listed. It can get a bit scary. So sometimes that can be frustrating. I think open source is so popular now, I'm like, why not just do open source? Let me see your code, please. And then finally, big tech. I've got Datadog up here. You already use them for everything else, so it's easy to integrate, right? And this can be true for a lot of people, and it can be the right choice, but there are some risks of a slow roadmap and conflicting interests. So just some things to be aware of as you're out there looking for your LLM Ops company. This is a slide I had put together for when we were evaluating different things. These are things I felt that LLM Ops platform needs and what it can. High volume capability and reliability for logging and tracing. Remember, we're doing millions of calls a month. It's got to be able to handle that. Flexible integration across a variety of code bases. At least a pattern. We're running Go, Ruby, Python, Node.js, TypeScript, React, a million different platforms. We've got to be able to integrate across all of them. And it's got to be really robust. I got to look at this and go like, okay, these guys know what they're doing. Fast and easy to integrate, and also fast to drop. Because let's be honest, the AI world moves really quickly. You might find that in a year you need to pivot. And finally, open source. I like seeing that code. And what it can't be, don't like expensive, don't like replacing key pieces of our infrastructure. I personally don't like shaky startups, and I like the tool. I didn't want a Frankenstein tool with MLOps. I wanted to avoid lock-in. So those are my opinions. Don't take them as facts. We ended up landing on OPIC, which is on the cute little, I don't even know what that is, a penguin or something that I tossed out. We really like what their platform has. It's free to use their platform for exploration. You can just start using it. And then if you want to really pull out the big bucks, it's like $40 a month. Yeah, it's crazy how cheap it is. They also, charge you like 0.01 cents for every trace you do. So something to be aware of. But it's a really great platform. We like using it, and it does tracing and it does evaluation, monitoring and evaluating, those two things we talked about. Now, integrating an LLM Ops platform, there's 4 types of integrations that you should be aware of when you're out there looking. The first is people are going to say, please route our LLM requests through our API and we'll trace everything. Now, think for a second why this is a bad idea. You're adding another failure point into your infrastructure, right? Think about it. OpenAI is already down like 3% of the year. Now you're going to have all of your requests routing through some startup servers and hoping they don't go down. If they do go down, suddenly you're out of the loop. Other option is they want to replace an LLM SDK with their SDK. I saw a lot of this where they said, oh, don't import OpenAI's SDK, import ours. I'm like, great. Now if OpenAI pushes out a new update to their SDK, I gotta wait till you update yours. So again, another failure point in your infrastructure that you would have to be slowed down on. I do like extending or wrapping your LLM SDK with their SDK. This is what OPIC does. I like this because OpenAI can continually update their SDK, and all I have to do is wrap it or extend it with what OPIC has, and then it'll automatically capture the incoming and outgoing calls, and then just load it into the OPIC platform so that I can then see the traces later on. And that's great, so I'm not slowed down by that. And then finally, auto instrumentation, I put AKA witchcraft, because it's like magic. I don't know if you've ever used something like Datadog. It's really cool though, you just install it in your application and you don't change anything in your code. It just automatically starts capturing all the inputs and outputs. I tried Googling how this works and I couldn't figure it out. So if someone can explain it to me afterwards, that would be great. And then once you are monitoring everything and you're ready to move on to evaluation, we're almost done here, folks. Start with one use case for evaluations. Find one place where you can win. Find one workflow that you're like, this is a high impact workflow. I think I can find a win here if I make a benchmark, I choose some metrics, I run some experiments, I tweak the prompt, I change the model, I change the temperature, and I get a higher quality result. Because what happens once you get that one win, from that one you create champions, right? All of a sudden that team that you helped improve their AI process, they're gonna go out there and be a champion for you. They're gonna say, hey, that ML Ops engineer or LLM engineer, AI engineer, whatever term you use to describe yourself, they're gonna be like, this guy saved the day. You should do whatever he asks, get the data he needs, cooperate with him, because he's going to change your life. He's gonna make your process so much better. So find those champions, find that one, and then from there, it'll be smooth sailing, hopefully. That's everything. Thank you so much for listening, and I'm happy to do a little bit of Q&A depending on how much time we have.
Question for you. So you mentioned early on about building in-house reliability solutions because you've got these third-party vendors you're working with, their stuff goes down. How does that compare to building in-house versus something like maybe even, this might be naive to say, but Open Router, right? What essentially is doing that thing for you.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think if I were starting today, I would go with something like Open Router or like LLM. The problem was when we started with AI a year and a half, 2 years ago, it just frankly wasn't there. The stuff just wasn't ready. So we built a lot of stuff in-house. Nowadays, I would say the infrastructure is a lot more built out, but you can find stuff out there that'll get the job done. So, yeah, it's a fair question. Yeah. Chris.
If Deepfake didn't exist, what would you go with?
It's a good question. Probably the other two that I was really interested in were the ones that I threw up on the board. Datadog was really interesting just because they were so slick. Their roadmap was a little slow though, so we ended up moving away from them. But we were actually like pretty serious about them for a second. And then Langfuse is a great option. I think especially if you're the kind of person who's into like open source stuff, they're a really great option. They're kind of trying to brand themselves with like Light LLM as part of this like OSS like ecosystem of like the whole tech stack of AI. So it's kind of interesting to see that. It's still really early, you know, the field can change really rapidly of who's gonna come out on top of in terms of like the top choices, but I think those three that you saw up there were my top three.
Yeah, so when you're creating metrics, you have a reference set of like ideal text or some sort of some like input output pairs, and I'm wondering just like how do you curate that and make sure it's like diverse and balanced and sort of representative of the problems you're really seeing?
It's a good question. So how do you make sure that your benchmark or your data set that you're using is diverse and representative of the problem you're trying to solve? I mean, this is like classic ML Ops, right? This is classic, like how do you make sure that you've got a good data set? I did statistics in school back at BYU. This is a lot of what we talked about. And there's a lot of like traditional techniques. This is not a new problem. Random sampling, of course. If you've got a total data set of millions and you want to create a smaller sample to benchmark on, random sampling is a great way to get a representative sample. Beyond that, there's other techniques. Also, just really understanding the problem well, I think is an important thing. Understanding what the problem is can really help you make sure that you do the right job. So, good question.
Where's Pattern on the kind of the road? Do you have many champions right now? And how has evangelizing the platform been going?
It's a great question. It's been going well. And I would say we have champions at different levels of AI usage. So we're really trying to establish a beachhead. Like it's literally how we think of it. We talk about it as like a beachhead in each department, where we're like, we want to find someone who's like an AI proponent in each department. And we work with that person to get them excited about AI and then have them share that with the rest of their team. Because once the rest of their team sees that, oh my gosh, this person on my team is saving hours, is more productive, is able to do all these cool things with AI, then the rest of their team will get excited about it. So we're trying to help speed up that adoption curve. And then with other aspects of it, of like the evaluation thing, we have, I would say, less champions at the stage right now because it's a harder ball to hit. And there's a smaller pool of people we're trying to plug in with that, but we do have some champions, and they're excited about what we've done. One example is we did some LLM Ops. We made a benchmark about how is our company Pattern showing up in different LLMs, right? This is something that's called GEO, Generative Engine Optimization. People are no longer finding products through Google. They're finding it through ChatGPT, through Perplexity, through all these different platforms. So we ran some LLM Ops, and now everyone's really excited about it. We're like, let's put together a team on this. Let's like dive into it more. So we're seeing it pay off. So it definitely happens, and we just see it growing more and more as we do it with different champions around the company. So, yeah.
Can we do 2 more questions?
2 more questions, and then we're out of time. Okay.
Just for, yes, this part, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you guys do much with human evals at scale? And if you do, like, what's the tooling story there? Open source vendors or something yourself?
That is a great question. So, human eval is super important. I skipped over that, but I'm glad you brought it up. The most important metric you can have is human preference. And if human preference is disagreeing with your data, then Jeff Bezos says, then you should check how you're collecting your data, because the anecdotes usually tell you that something's wrong with your data. So For using human eval with OPIC, we kind of spun our own little homegrown tool together, something very basic, because OPIC has ways you can upload human evals, but they haven't built out a UI for doing it yet, just a way for you to upload them and like manually save them. So we spun together our own little UI, but there's a lot of platforms out there that'll do it. So just find the one that works right for you, but I would say it's super important, yeah. And then there was one more question over here.
I don't know if there's something else you want to ask another one. I know this is a little out of the scope of your talk. How do you think about third-party LLM providers and security? I don't know how much that's being built where your company is, where I work for a bank.
Right.
So
It's a great question. The security is important, and I always think it's interesting because it's like no one at work is asking about their Gmail, right? But it's like your Gmail at work is secure, but your personal one's not, right? Like your personal one, you're getting personalized ads. Google is reading, scraping every single email that goes through your personal inbox. And the same is true with ChatGPT. You use the free version, like you are the product, right? Your data is going into the training data set. But then if you're using the business API and you're paying for it, you are not going into the training data set. But there is this weird stigma around this higher level of expectation of security around it. We definitely do take it seriously. Like we have DeepSeek, of course, blocked on all of our Wi-Fi. So, we take it seriously. But I would say, if you're trying to convince your company about security, you can show off some of the security stuff that Bedrock has. They've got some really cool stuff where you can use private links so that your company's VPC can communicate to the LLM servers in a separate VPC over the AWS backbone, so it doesn't go over the public internet. So that can be a great way if you're trying to figure out how to have that conversation with people at your work, if you guys use AWS, of like, hey, Bedrock's a good option. So.
no, yeah, we definitely have that conversation is constantly ongoing, and we're using Bedrock and things like that. But,
Okay.
I'm just curious to know if there's additional, like, from the monitoring perspective,
Right.
from the perspective, is there certain things that you're looking for with data security?
Yeah.
What the models are returning the prompts.
Yeah, and that's another reason to look at the inputs and outputs. Most of our usage, like 95% of our usage, 99%, there's a lot of back-end stuff, data classification. So we're not particularly worried about security with that. We do try to keep an eye on like what our employees are putting in and out every once in a while to make sure it's not like super atrocious. But we try not to like hover over their shoulder too much either. So yeah, I think it's a good question.
Let's give Jeremy another round of applause.